most people, it seems, at least on the left, are quite sure that that now the protests will stop. And while it's only today that most of the media have declared a winner, I don't see any evidence that the riots, anyway, put aside the protests, because really they are related phenomena, but very often it's quite clear when you're talking about riots and not protests, are not stopping at all. So let me just provide a few examples. Here, hold on, go back and forth a few times. We have the Pacific Northwest Youth Liberation Front saying, "Fuck Trump, fuck Biden, death to America. We want something better than this trash and we're going to take it." So that was the late evening of the election.
Wait. Scroll over on that one to the next image.
Whoever they vote for, we are ungovernable.
Ungovernable.
Yep.
Yeah, this is...
So next, Zach, thank you. There's just a better picture of that here. Whoever they vote for, we are ungovernable, with the signs of anarchy. Okay, Zach. Let's see. This, we don't want Biden, we want revenge for police murders, imperialist wars, and fascist massacres. And maybe, they've got a lot of remain ungovernable. Let's see, the fight continues. Post-election protest, the fight continues. We don't know what the fight is about even at this point. We're just being told the fight continues. And of course, what we've been seeing in Portland still every night since the election is more vandalism. There was a church in downtown Portland. Here we go, is Multnomah County Sheriff reporting on this church that was doing tremendous work with homeless, which of course Portland has a huge problem with, being vandalized sufficiently that they have now declared that the church itself can no longer be doing some of its work with the homeless because the church is not intact enough to do so. And then let me just one more example of this. Here's Nancy Rommelman, our friend who was in Portland for several days this week, who was present to see, for instance, the Wildfang, basically a feminist women's fashion store, had all of its windows blown out, and many other things like that. So I highly recommend this article in Reason if you haven't read it, by Nancy Rommelman. So they, and who is they? It's a tiny fringe element among the people who were in fact protesting peacefully, of course, right, for many months. But it's not a tiny fringe part of those people who started rioting reliably every night after dark for many months here in Portland. And why is it that they haven't changed their tune now that the election has actually come to pass? Well, because it's not actually responsive to its environment. This is not activism that is responsive to its environment. Therefore, it should both not be taken seriously, I would say, as a critique of particular policies or politicians, but it is being taken seriously. Mayor Wheeler, who we triumphantly reelected because by doing so we avoided the actual Antifa candidate, Mayor Wheeler and Governor Brown, who this week has been making some moves in, I think, the correct direction, but have been taking these people seriously with their batshit demands as if they are actually responding to policy and people. And at the same time as we should not be taking their critique as if it is actually about policy or people, given that they are telling us it's not. We should also be taking it far more seriously than it is as a force of destruction, and not just of windows, and not even just of individual acts of violence, of which there is plenty of evidence, but an actual force of destruction. I could not find the couple of images that I'd seen earlier in the week from Denver and I think from Philly, which have them arguing that liberalism itself is the enemy, death to America.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that this is an attack on the very fabric of pluralistic secular society. And if you pay attention to what it says and what it does, this is very clear. Now, what it has gotten good at is reversing cause and effect. So the fact that you have a large number of, Chardonnay liberals with Trump derangement syndrome, those people are susceptible to partnering with anything that appears to be equally angry about the thing that has their focus. And so, the whole thing that we watched go down in slow motion here in Portland was the relentless attack on policing and governance and authority that forced Trump at the federal level to bring in DHS officers, which then was portrayed as the precipitating event for the violence. And the point is, cause and effect have been reversed. What it is that is being sought by these protesters and rioters is quite clear in what they say. They're not good at keeping it under wraps, but somebody paying casual attention, or worse, somebody editing what it is that others see, can very easily portray it in the wrong direction so that it appears to be a reaction to something that they themselves find troubling. Yes. Now, I will say, at first, I was very heartened to hear Governor Brown's bringing in of the National Guard, and the fact that finally we saw a proportionate response to the violence where there were.
So just to provide some details, she declared a state of emergency in the state of Oregon from 5 p.m. the day before Election Day through Wednesday, 5 p.m., and basically allowed the possibility that the National Guard would come in, and that they, and I think it was Multnomah County, which is the main county that Portland is in, would have the authority to use tear gas, such that the non-lethal means that have been taken off the table by Mayor Wheeler would now be back on the table, such that perhaps we could actually avoid state-promoted violence while also actually keeping the peace. And in the wake of the riots, both election night and basically promises to continue it the next night, she has now extended that. I don't know if it's officially the state of emergency or just all of the stuff around the National Guard through at least tomorrow, through at least Sunday.
And very much to her credit,
yes.
In so doing, she did not make the usual move that we've seen in so many Democratic municipalities and other provinces and the like, but she said, we won't tolerate violence from the left, from the right, or the center.
That was her phrase.
And anyway, it was well done, overdue inexplicably, but nonetheless done, and done before the election. So, good on you, Governor Brown.
Very much so.
The other thing, though, is we were, of course, very concerned about the fact that Mayor Wheeler was facing this challenge from Sarah Iannarone to his nominal left, and she was a not so cryptic supporter of Antifa. So that was a very frightening prospect that she might win. Now, she lost, which I initially took to be a good sign that reason had won out. And as much as Wheeler has been a spectacular disappointment is an understatement to say the very least, he stood a greater chance of ultimately coming to his senses and standing up to this nonsense that is threatening his city and its citizens. But what I found out later was that, in fact, there had been a substantial write-in campaign. Now, nobody, because of the way the ballots are reported, we cannot say whose name was written in, but the only plausible candidate to have gotten as many write-in votes was actually somebody understood to be even to the nominal left of Iannarone, a founder of the group Don't Shoot Portland. So it is not clear at all why Ted Wheeler won, and whether that was an outbreak of reason or the result of a divided vote on the I'm going to not use an epithet. I'm going to say the extreme illiberal left. But in any case, the right outcome did happen. That right outcome is still very little security in light of what Wheeler has allowed. But,
well, and here we have Wheeler today. I am grateful to be mayor of a city that overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We can now move forward instead of fighting against an administration that tried to move us backward. We now will have a partner in the federal government instead of an opponent. Here he is reversing cause and effect, willfully, confusedly. Who knows? I don't think he's a dumb man. So it's possible that he is legitimately confused, or he really, or he saw exactly the threat that you saw and went like, wow, actually half the people who voted in Portland, more than half the people who voted in Portland, I think, voted for either someone who actively supports Antifa or someone even farther left than her. And I don't like this description of them as being
it
left,
really has
but
nothing to do with left.
yeah, even more illiberal than her.
Yeah.
And is imagining that those of us who voted for him will put up with anything, and all he has to do is keep on moving more and more liberal. And one thing that I think, the vast majority of people who watch us and listen to us aren't in Portland, but I cannot imagine that the next time the mayor of Portland is up for re-election, that the vast majority of us who still live here, however many of us that might be at that point, will be paying such insignificant attention that we allow this kind of diabolical choice to show up on the ballot again.
Well, so the problem, of course, is that I think people are voting and signaling as if this is all an abstraction.
Yeah.
And it is very obvious that it will not take long. If you allow a force to break the windows of whatever businesses it wants and to terrorize citizens the way the rioters have been doing night after night, if you allow people to do this, it is obviously going to destroy the economic base of the city. It's not a place that somebody's going to want to start a business. If there are no businesses, then where is the tax base?
Right.
So, people are voting in a way that completely upends the capacity of the city to be governed well. Now, to the extent that there's a defense for, a liberally minded city, it's you want one that is capable of accomplishing things that others can't. You want, better transportation. You want, safer, cleaner streets. You want the city to function well. And in fact, that's the slogan. Portland is the city that works, right?
Is that right? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Right. But the thing is, it's very easy to upend that. And then the point is everybody's worse off. And so whatever your liberal values have you pursuing, you've undone them by virtue of the fact that there's nothing to do those things with.
Yeah. Well, so just a couple more minutes on Portland, on politics that are local to us here. There is something good that happened that is an actual positive, as opposed to a very much a lesser of two evils, which is the situation with the mayoral race in Portland. But I'm going to start with something that's definitely not so good. Why won't it open? Okay, well, I can't open that site for some reason. Okay. So City Commissioner Dan Ryan, I'm trying to open this link from Willamette Week, and Zach's going to try to open it for me, but now I can't read my notes. So Dan Ryan, who was an extant city commissioner and who was not who's not on the ballot this year, voted against an $18 million cut to the police budget. And a mob came to his house in the middle of the night and vandalized it and put up flares in front. And this is in part what prompted Governor Brown to say, actually, we're extending either the emergency order, or at least parts of it that allow the National Guard and the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office to oversee and give more power to the Portland Police Bureau. So I actually don't need that anymore, Zach. I'm done talking about it. So I need my screen back, though, please, so that I can go to the next one. So that's all terrible. But what isn't terrible is this. We had this commissioner-elect, Mingus Mapps, who is a former political science professor, who is Black, who is, they call him conservative, but what that means in Portland, I actually have no idea. He won against incumbent Chloe Udley, who was very much in line with sort of Iana Roan and Hardesty and some of the other, actually get rid of the police people, has stood up already. He's just a commissioner-elect, and yet somehow he was allowed to also vote against the $18 million defunding of the police that happened this week. And he says, This campaign of intimidation and vandalism against Commissioner Ryan must stop, Map said. Mobs have descended on his house in the middle of the night in order to intimidate him into voting the way they want. It happened again last night. That's true. It happened 2 nights running. A mob descended on his house, broke windows, and sprayed paint on his home. Maps was joined on a press call by about a dozen Black community leaders. His remarks were significant in part because they signaled a new dynamic in City Hall. A Black man will be among the most conservative members of the council, and he is wielding the language of civil rights and equity to condemn the excesses of a protest movement that also says it is seeking racial justice. Well, hallelujah. That's amazing.
That
right?
is amazing.
This is one of the few things that actually really gives me hope right now from this election.
Yeah, I agree. That's a rare but unambiguous sign of reason